Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael Del Giorno and David Zanotti.
Just how much money has iVoters.com lost over the years by refusing to monetize? Rob Walgate joins us again today here at 1850 Main Street.
Rob, thanks for stopping by and taking some time out of a very busy schedule, I know, to talk more with me about iVoters.com. A lot of folks may have not heard yet about iVoters, but this is a service that's been around since 1998. And surely by now you're making boatloads of money off of this idea, right?
No money's made on iVoters.com. It's a service we provide. We provide it to people all across the country, all 50 states, free of charge, because we believe our republic operates at its best when we have an educated republic, when they know the issues, they know the candidates before they step into the voting booth. So we just want to be a resource, an educational resource for voters all across the country.
So let me ask you a question. If we could put this in dollars, how much money do you think that you have lost? Because you're a charitable organization, American Policy Roundtable.
Millions, yeah. Easily. And you don't even have to finish the question. Millions. Because of the number of people that visit the site, they provide us their address, their zip code. The reason we need their exact specific location is because we know how district lines are drawn, and the person across the street from you may not have the same state rep. They may not be the same member of Congress for you and the person across the street from you. So that's why we need it. So the reason I would say millions is because all that data we gather, we don't sell it to anybody. We don't give it away. We just use it to provide you with information to make an educated choice.
And the way you collect the data, you just get the address. You don't ask somebody for their name, right?
No name, no email address, none of that. Just the location that you want to see the ballot from state rep all the way to the White House, and the candidates running in your area will pop up. You'll have a chance to see their website. You'll see their social media profiles. You'll be able to, we say you can go into the shallow end of the pool, or you can go deep sea diving in the ocean. We can take you places that you can't imagine looking for information. And people do get lost on the site because they'll start clicking and going places looking for data and information. And again, it can frustrate people as well, because some people will call and say, would you just tell us who to vote for? And we won't do that. We're not going to tell you who to vote for. We do provide endorsements, not our own endorsements. What you will see before you vote in the fall is a list of endorsements from many organizations on the far left, many organizations on the right, many organizations in the middle. We'll show you their endorsements, who they are endorsing, who they are telling people to vote for, and that will help you as a voter make a decision.
All right, so you don't make money by selling data. You refuse to collect enough to make that data connectable and then therefore saleable. You don't make money by charging for the site. You've already lost millions, but because you and I work for the same mission at the American Policy Roundtable, and we work from the same set of offices around the country, we work with the same staff, we have no secrets. We're in this together. And we both know that the organization, the American Policy Roundtable, has lost millions of dollars from donors who refuse to give to support a truly nonpartisan voter information site that will let anyone access the material and will tell the truth about all the candidates based upon what information is available without opinionating it or sliding it or slanting it. We just put the facts out there. And I know for a fact, I can name them by name, millions of dollars that have walked out of the room because people wanted us to make this site applicable to a wholly partisan audience to attempt to impact the outcome of an election.
And that's why we put both political parties on there. That's why we put independents on there. That's why we put everybody on there. We don't just give you one team or the other.
So that means that surely iVoters must be the most naive site in the world, because all that matters anymore is partisan fights. All that matters is shirts and skins. It's sharks and jets. It's West Side Story. This is a battlefield. And all that matters is who wins the fight.
That's what a lot of people think. But when I talk to my neighbors, when I'm out in the community, they're sick of the fights. They don't want to hear about it. They know that's what cable news does. They know that's what the screaming heads do because, I always say if there's a fire, what do you want to do with the fire? Well, I would like to contain it, pour some water on it, put it out. I think too many people today look for a can of gasoline and see how they can exploit the fire, see how they can make it bigger, and then say, look at me. But we have no desire to do that. I want to see this country, our states, our local governments operate in an efficient manner. And I think one way to do that is to provide people with information on how to make an educated decision. Don't do it because we tell you who to vote for, your neighbor tells you who to vote for, the guy down the street tells you who to vote for. Do it because you know the facts and know the data and you know the truth. Don't get caught up in the 15-second commercials.
So I have found over the years that the biggest reason people don't vote is because the process is intimidating. It's kind of like, if you go into that classroom and you sit there, eventually there's going to be a test. And if you don't have your homework done, you're going to flunk the test. And I feel that's the way people look at voting. Like if I show up, I'm going to flunk the test.
Well, and that's why I would encourage people to take their kids and their grandkids with them when they vote, not so they can vote, but so they can see the process. Because if they start going at a young age and watching people participate in the process, it won't be intimidating to them when they're 18 or 19 years old. They're going to say, oh, I've done this before. I've been here before. I take my children with me every chance I get when I go vote. And the reason for that is I want them to be familiar with the process when they are eligible to vote for themselves. I don't want them to say, well, I don't want to do it because that's scary. No, it's not scary. You just got to be prepared.
Well, one more attempt at this whole honesty thing, not suggesting that it makes us noble, but one of the missions, one of the principled statements, the objectives of the American Policy Roundtable is to see a restoration of the first principles upon which our country was founded, those principles that gave us the Declaration and the Constitution and the whole concept of voting and the franchise, those principles that wouldn't let us rest until women had the right to vote and all people of color had the right to vote, that wouldn't let us rest sitting as a country divided between slave and free, that still won't let us rest on any given day, because if we think about the promise of America and what we're delivering in regards to our daily lives and our government, we've still got a long way to go. So it's sort of like we recognize the responsibility of self-government. And the only way self-government is held accountable is if you have, the founders believed, frequent elections, that the people stayed in touch with the process and they felt that they were getting the right kind of representation and that they had an ability to hold those people accountable. So voting really, truly matters. Now, how we got into the mess that we're in, that's a generational problem. That's been going on for like 100 years.
Well, you talk about the founders and you talk about frequent elections. We know they were committed to it because think about it. They're the ones who instituted 2 years for United States House members.
Yeah, and that was when there was no
2 years,
no air conditioning in Washington, D.C. There were barely covered roof houses. People were still using outhouses. They didn't even have indoor plumbing in a lot of these instances. I mean, who are we kidding here?
Well, and how do you get back to your home district?
By horse.
Think about travel.
Yeah. And it's not like we had spent.
We're going to do it.
We didn't expand it the whole way across the country, but doggone it, it's still a long way from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. It's a long way from Maine to Washington, D.C. by horse.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you imagine going from the shores of South Carolina, the low country, to Washington, D.C.? That's a chore in itself.
Yep. And yet they still held Congress to 2-year terms. Okay, speaking of Congress, let's talk about Congress.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for the lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
All right, let's talk about Congress. There's a big election, obviously, this year, and it seems like there's no escaping the endless news cycle on the race for the White House. But doggone it, the House of Representatives is a whole lot more important than what's going to happen in the White House. I know the presidency is important and the executive branch has a role to play, and those are important responsibilities. But the House is so much more important for a million different reasons. We've talked about that before. We talk about it all the time. What do you see happening in the U.S. House of Representatives? Because at iVoters, obviously, you're not steering the election, but you're gathering a tremendous amount of data. And you know those hot spots, those places where the numbers are close or where there's candidate issues that are going on and there's like internal local games that are happening nobody else is even covering. What's going to happen in the House of Representatives?
Man, it's going to be interesting to watch. We know there was a big vote in the House of Representatives last week that was, 212 to 212, and I believe the Speaker broke the tie. So we know things are tight and things are close. And when you look, there's some seats in the Northeast that they've been blue for a while, and the Democrat Party's had a stronghold on them, and they could be moving red. And there's also some districts along the southern border that I know people are keeping a close eye on for that reason as well. I think immigration will play a strong, that'll be one of the issues that's most discussed in this election. So I think people are watching there as well. So the House is where it's at. You also have, and this is where it comes into play, how districts are drawn. And Dave, how many years have people been fighting about that since the foundation of the country?
Yeah, that's
right?
it. Gerrymandering was named after one of the people named Jerry or Gary
Yes.
back in the beginning. Yeah, in the colonial era.
So, I mean, that's still an argument and a debate that is held to this day. The other thing, and it's something you and I and others have talked about on the public square for years and years, but I know people are paying a lot more attention to it now, is congressional districts are drawn based on population, not based upon citizens. So as we move towards taking another census in roughly 6 years, and you see this influx of immigrants coming in, they're counted in the census, and that determines congressional representation. Now, some people may say, well, they're going to places that would elect someone I wouldn't agree with anyway. Well, wait a minute. They may be, but we also know that congressional representation is how electoral college votes are determined as well. So if a state gains another congressional seat because of the fact of population growth, not citizen growth, then that state also would gain an electoral college vote. That would mean another state would have to lose an electoral college vote. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch over the next 6 years.
So in essence, open borders have the potential of completely changing our system of representative government, where the representation would go toward population mass, not actual citizens.
Yes, that's how it's determined now. If you remember when Donald Trump was in office, there was a lot of questions about when people filled out the census, should they say whether or not they're a citizen? And a lot of people went up in arms about that because they say that ICE was going to use it to go after people and other things. And they were, I think, many were saying, no, we're trying to prove a point that there's so many people here that we don't know that are here, that we're counting in the census that aren't citizens. And it is having an impact on our representative representation in Washington, and as it turns out, the presidency when it comes to the Electoral College.
So Congress could have that debate, right? They could make a change in regards to how the census is recorded.
How the census is recorded, yes, they could. They could, and they could make that change. And I for one would like to see them have that discussion openly. They should have that discussion openly. And some people say, well, why in the beginning wasn't it with citizens? Well, I mean, when you go back to the founders and the foundation of the country, you didn't find a ton of citizens, if you will. The country was being built. They were coming over. They were trying to go through and become citizens through the proper channels the right way. But that's the reason for that.
So just because a person can't vote if they're in line to become a citizen doesn't mean they don't get counted if they fill out a census.
And even if they came through a porous southern border, they can still be counted in the census, even if they didn't have permission to come through. I don't think anyone envisioned in 2020 that when this debate happened a little bit about filling out the census, that we would have the border as wide open as we've had it over the past 3.5 years.
So that's a subject that if Congress had the courage, they could actually do something about.
They should be doing something about it yesterday.
All right. So Congress is split 219, 213. 219 R's, 213 Dems. But there's been people that are retiring, people that are threatening to retire. It's still a pretty darn close split, right? There's only a handful of votes that gives the Republicans a majority in the Congress right now.
Yeah, just a handful. And as we mentioned last week, we had a very tight vote where you had people on the far left and people on the far right voting together on an issue. So you're still seeing that on things, which will leave you scratching your head. But it is very close.
Is anybody seeing a blue wave or a red wave coming in the 2024 congressional race?
Not right now. And I would say one reason for that is we still are so far away from the election. I mean, the line I always use is the NFL season will be over halfway over by the time we know who the president is and who serves in all 435 House seats and who holds power in the U.S. Senate. So there's a long way to go before we make those decisions.
Well, I was checking out a number of sites that handicap these races or try to establish who's a lock race on the D, lock race on the R, lean R, lean D, toss-up races, open seats, et cetera. What I found was interesting is there's not a whole lot of races right now that are projected to be up for grabs in the U.S. House. And interesting enough, when I went to look at the Ds and the Rs, you have situations like on the Democrat side where seats might possibly flip. We've got 2 open seats in Michigan with no incumbents. You have 2 races that are possible flips in Ohio, and you've got 2 in Pennsylvania. All right, so look at that. That's Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania in regards to the Ds. That's interesting. But when you look at the Rs, races where they could lose seats or seats could flip, you've got 2 in Arizona, 4 in California, and 3 in New York. Now, that is not what most people are thinking as far as how the balance of power is going to come down to. It could come down to, what do you got, 7, 9, 15, 16 seats.
Yeah, and we'll be watching closely on them. I mean, and who would think that some of those races, as you said, will be Michigan. I always find it interesting when, you think of this in the determining of power. We're always watching Northern California, it feels like. For some House seats that are in Northern California. You wouldn't think those would be the ones that would make a difference one way or the other. I think there will be a lot of eyes on border districts as we get closer. I think people that are running in those areas, I think people on the left will be begging the administration to start cracking down on the border. And I think the administration will have to start cracking down on the border to help them during election season, make it look like they are trying to make a move in that direction.
So Congress, schmongress, who gives a hoot about all that? Let's just watch the race at the top because all that matters who's the president, blah, blah, blah. That's the standard motif. But this has been a very thoughtful conversation. You've given me a lot to think about already here. But let's just think about one more thing that's kind of interesting. For the people who dismiss Congress and dismiss these seats, it's what we just talked about, the fascinating nature of the House of Representatives might come down to 4 swing districts in California, not the state of California. We know where California is going to end up. It's a radical leftist state in regards to representation. But what about a handful of districts that are conservative or competitive? It's the same thing with New York. You say, well, New York, my goodness, look at that governor, look at the senators, whoa. There's a handful of races in New York where the districts are competitive. People have not sold out one way or the other. And those kinds of districts could make all the difference. But then here's the big close, the icing on the cake, if you would. Let's just say that the Electoral College is tied for the presidency. Let's just say that nobody can get to 270. Let's just say that there's a blue dot or a red dot in Nebraska or Maine in a single congressional district that Bobby Kennedy takes off the map. And neither Trump or Biden can get to 270. Where does this election go?
Goes to the House. It goes to the House, and each state has, in essence, one vote. And the respective congressional delegation within each state comes together to make their vote. So there are more Republican-held states in the House than there are Democrat states. So if that was to be the case, you would see that most likely the Republican nominee be the president of the United States.
Just one more incentive to pay attention to the House. All right, we got to go get some more coffee, but I want to continue this conversation And I want to get into the question about the U.S. Senate, because I think there's some secrets there people are missing too.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. And if you want more, check out Your Morning Show and The Public Square. Your Morning Show is where you can hear Michael and David talking about the stories of the day every day. And you can learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy at The Public Square. You can listen to Your Morning Show and The Public Square on the iHeart mobile app and on radio stations across the country. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.